Okay, we're in the third section of Glamour, a world problem, and we're gonna cover the introduction to this section today, the ending of Glamour. We come now to the consideration of the third section relating to world glamour. It is difficult to write clearly about this matter because we are in the midst of its most concentrated expression. So when this was being written, we were in the midst of its most concentrated expression, and this is around 1950. Was the first printing. The worst the world has ever seen, because glamour, incident to centuries of greed and selfishness, of aggression and materialism, has been focused in a triplicity of nations. Greed, selfishness, aggression of materialism, and focused in a triplicity of nations. It is therefore easily to be seen and most effective in manifestation. Three nations express the three aspects of world glamour: illusion, glamour, and Maya. In an amazing manner, three nations express the three aspects of world glamour in an amazing manner, and their powerful assault upon the consciousness of humanity is dependent not only upon the response of Germany, Japan, and Italy to this ancient miasma, but also upon the fact that every nation, United Nations, as well as totalitarian nations, are tainted with this universal condition. The freedom of the world is consequently largely dependent upon those people in every nation who within themselves have moved forward out of one or other of these glamorous illusions and Mayavic impressions of the human soul into a state of awareness wherein they can see the conflict in its wider terms, i.e., as that existing for them between the dweller on the threshold and the angel of the presence. Well, friends, that's pretty deep. You know, we're told that this is not what we thought. We know that we're wrapped in Maya and glamour and illusion. We know that, you know, the mind is creating much of this experience in the lower three worlds. It's mental. And now we have the master telling us that these conflicts, the conflict in its wider term, is the conflict between the dweller on the threshold and the angel of the presence. And that's the reason for these, for the state of the world right now. And I guess you can see that you know, there's this resistance to want to move forward, and as was stated earlier, it's difficult to write about this matter because we're in the midst of its most concentrated expression. The worst the world has ever seen, because of glamour, incident to centuries of greed and selfishness, of aggression and materialism. Wow. Wow, there's a lot going on. It's incredible. Okay. These people are the aspirants, disciples, and initiates of the world. He's talking about now those who can see the conflict in wider terms. They're aware of the dualism, the essential dualism of the conflict, and are not so preeminently conscious of the threefold nature and the differentiated condition of the situation which underlies the realized dualism. Their approach to the problem is therefore simpler, and because of this, world direction lies largely in their hands at this time. So these people are the aspirants, disciples, and initiates of the world. They are aware of the dualism, the essential dualism of the conflict, because from this conflict, essentially, there will be harmony, right? So the dweller has to face the angel of the presence, and that these two have to, the duality has to fade. So this is essential. Preeminently conscious of the threefold nature. He's putting a lot. He's putting a lot on their hands here. Their approach to the problem is therefore simpler, and because of this, world direction lies largely in their hands. It is right here that religion has, as a whole, gone astray. I refer to Orthodox religion. It has been preoccupied with the dweller on the threshold, and the eyes of the theologian have been held upon the material, phenomenal aspect of life through fear and its immediacy, and the fact of the angel has been a theory and a point of wishful thinking. The balance is being adjusted by the humanitarian attitudes, which are so largely coming into control, irrespective of any theological trend. These attitudes take their stand upon the belief of the innate rightness of the human spirit in the divinity of man and upon the indestructible nature of the soul of mankind. This inevitably brings in the concept of the presence or of God immanent, and is the result of the needed revolt against the belief in God transcendent. As we talked about, and this book talks about the presence much more heavily than the other books that I've seen, but this presence that we're talking about here is that literally, it is not, it's here now. It's that, that crystal clear consciousness that, that we're told to be in. And we shouldn't be looking for the transcendent aspect of it. We should be looking for it right now, right? It should be, right here. This spiritual revolution was entirely a balancing process, and need cause no basic concern, for God transcendent externally exists, but can only be seen and known and correctly approached by God immanent in the individual man, in groups and nations, in organized forms, and in religion, in humanity as a whole, and in planetary life itself. Humanity is today, and has been for ages, battling illusion, glamour, and Maya. So we're just waking up. Advanced thinkers, those upon the probationary path, upon the path of discipleship and the path of initiation, have reached a point where materialism and spirituality, the dweller on the threshold and the angel of the presence, and the basic dualism of manifestation can be seen clearly defined. So can we see this clearly defined now? And, in a sense, I think we can, just based on, if we just spend just probably a little bit more time contemplating what we just read here, I think we would have a very good, clear understanding of what we're looking at in the world here. And it's probably something, it's there, but it's not something that we think about too much as a whole, because of all of the individual events taking place around the world that are pretty intense right now, especially in this year of 2023. March 1st, 2023, there's a lot going on in the world, right? There's a lot of points of crisis. There's a lot of points of tension. And we're waiting for this, for emergence. And there is consciousness, there is waking. But, there's a lot more, seemingly a lot more places that are going into crisis, and certainly at points of tension right now. So it's hard to see, in a sense. But there is a lot of emerging consciousness, if we can say it like that. Hold on a second here. All right, so because of this clarity of demarcation, the issues underlying the present world events, the objectives of the present worldwide struggle, the modes and methods of reestablishing the spiritual contact so prevalent in Atlantean days and so long lost, and the recognition of those techniques which can bring in the New World era and its cultural order can be clearly noted and appraised. This is a very interesting statement here that I don't have clarity on at this very instant. So I'm going to read it again. Because of this clarity of demarcation, the issues underlying the present world events, the objectives of the present worldwide struggle, the modes and methods of reestablishing the spiritual contact so prevalent in Atlantean days and so long lost, and the recognition of the techniques which can bring in the New World era and its cultural order can be clearly noted and appraised. Well, this is not something that right here, this is not something that I'm familiar with. I would have to ask, unless he's going to explain to us what that is. I haven't come across the spiritual contact that was so prevalent. My understanding was very astral in those days. During Atlantis, I don't know. All generalizations admit of error. It might, however, be said that Germany has forced in herself world glamour, the most potent and expressive of the three aspects of glamour. Japan is manifesting the force of Maya, the crudest form of material force. Italy, individualistic and mentally polarized, is the expression of world illusion. The United Nations, with all their faults, limitations, weaknesses, and nationalisms, are focusing the conflict between the dweller and the angel, and thus the three forms of glamour, and the final form of the conflict between the spiritual ideal and the material opponent are appearing simultaneously. The United Nations are, however, gradually and most decisively throwing the weight of their effort and aspiration on to the side of the angel, thus restoring the lost balance and slowly producing on a planetary scale those attributes and conditions which will eventually dispel illusion, dissipate glamour, and devitalize the prevalent Maya. This they are doing by the increased clear thinking of the general public of all the nations, bound together to conquer the three Axis powers, by their growing ability to conceive ideas in terms of the whole, in terms of a desirable world order or federation, and their capacity to discriminate between the forces of light and the potency of evil or materialism. So I guess we should talk about this because, you know, the United Nations obviously did not come along, I would assume, in the manner that was hoped for. You know, what we're looking at there, you know, was it fully commandeered? Was it, you know, by the forces of evil? We don't know. You know, we don't know how it's being used. You know, we can't really judge. It's hard to judge, man, because you want people to wake up. How are you going to get them to do it if you know, and then if, you know, what's needed may not be always what we want. So, you know, is it possible things look different than, is it possible that things are different than what they appear to be? So I personally will withhold judgment. I have, I suppose I have opinions that are irrelevant. I tend to think that suffering is needed in a lot of ways. Just, you know, potentially, you know, you have to be shaken up. How do you do it on a mass? How do we do that on a mass scale? So, but it still doesn't appear that it's it went the, you know, the way that was thought at this time, for sure. The work being done by those who see the world stage as the arena for the conflict between the dweller and the threshold and the angel of the presence might be itemized as: one, the producing of those world conditions in which the forces of light can overcome the forces of evil. This they do by the weight of their armed forces plus their clear insight. To the educating of humanity in the distinction between A, spirituality and materialism, pointing to the differing goals of the combatant forces. B, sharing in greed, the difference between them, outlining a future world wherein the four freedoms will be dominant and all will have that which is needed for right living processes. I'm not exactly sure what the 4 freedoms are. Hold on, I'm going to find out though, because I'm probably just being silly and missing something. That should be right up and close into my mind here. Okay, I had to go to, I had to find it. So I'm going to read it since we're right here. Discuss these 4 freedoms. In the future day, this is from the externalization of the hierarchy on page 319, written by Franklin D. Roosevelt, that who DK calls that great disciple. In the future days, which we seek to make secure, we look forward to a world founded upon 4 essential human freedoms. The first is freedom of speech and expression everywhere in the world. The second is freedom of every person to worship God in his own way everywhere in the world. The third is freedom from want, which translated into world terms means economic understandings, which will secure to every nation a healthy, peaceful lifetime for its inhabitants everywhere in the world. The fourth freedom is freedom from fear, which translated into world terms means a worldwide reduction of armaments to such a point and in such a thorough fashion that no nation will be in a position to commit an act of physical aggression against any neighbor anywhere in the world. And now that may sound pretty progressive, but like we just said, this was written by Franklin Roosevelt. So, you know, that, I mean, this would be, you know, this would obviously be great. It'd be fantastic. And we, you know, to get to that point, you know, we don't know what exactly is going to have to happen there. I almost, that would be a very deep contemplation. You'd have to spend quite some time. I want to say, figuring out how that process might go. And maybe he did. I'm sure he did. He said it. So he had that. He was given that. You know, you received that, I guess, through, you know, through intuition or through one of the eyes. What are the eyes? I'm stuck on that right now, but it's illumination and inspiration. He was inspired to think and write that. Say those words, right? So there. So we just covered these here. Talked about the access order of master races, right? Fellowship, light and dark. Sharing and greed, outlining a future world wherein the 4 freedoms will be dominant and all will have that which is needed for right living processes. See light and dark, demonstrating the difference between an illumined future of liberty and opportunity and the dark future of slavery. D, fellowship and separation, indicating a world order where racial hatreds, caste distinctions, and religious differences will form no barrier to international understanding, and the access order of master races determined religious attitudes and enslaved peoples. Wow. And the whole and the part, pointing to the time which is approaching under the evolutionary urge of spirit, wherein the part or the point of life assumes its responsibility for the whole and the whole exists for the good of the part. Well, that's a very interesting stage under the evolutionary urge of spirit. Right? The dark aspect has been brought about by ages of glamour. The light is being emphasized and made clearer by the world aspirants and disciples who, by their attitudes, their actions, their writings, and their utterances, are bringing the light into dark places through preparing the way for spiritual energies, which will sweep humanity into an era of comprehension, leading to a focused mental clarification of men's minds throughout the world. These three imminent energies are, oh, and there they all are, there are the eyes, the energy of the intuition, which will gradually dispel world illusion and produce automatically a great augmentation of the ranks of the initiates. Certainly would. It'd be an incredible augmentation to the ranks. B, the activity of light, which will dissipate by the energy of illumination, the world glamour, and bring many thousands onto the path of discipleship. As soon as you can see through that, remember, as we talked about this, as soon as you can see through it, and by the reception of facts and truth, it's immediately dispelled, even if it's just for a moment. And in doing this, of course, it will bring many thousands onto the path of discipleship. And at the time this was written, these books were written, and starting early in the early 1900s, or we can go back to I'm figure 1920 or so. It was said that there were thousands potentially, and now that by the end of the century, by the year 2000, or coming into this point we're in now, there would be millions of those entering the path or on the path or something to that effect. 4, releasing new life into the planet through the medium of every possible agency. The first step towards this release is the proving that the power of materialism is broken by the complete defeat of the access powers. And secondly, by the ability of the United Nations to demonstrate, when this has been done, the potency of the spiritual values by their constructive undertakings to restore world order and to lay those foundations which will guarantee a better and more spiritual way of life. These constructive attitudes and undertakings must be assumed individually by every person and by nations as collective wholes. The first is being undertaken at this time. The second remains as yet to be done. And, as we look at what happened here, it doesn't look like this plan really came to fruition, does it? Not as DK wanted, anticipated, and probably had hoped. So, what does that mean for these things? This still continues today, I would assume, and to on some level, and we'll be. I think that alludes to the fact that we're waiting for that urge, that spiritual urge, or by spirit, the urge pushing on by spirit, as opposed to by other men helping other men. In a sense. 5, bringing home to the nations of the world the truths taught by the Buddha, the Lord of Light, and the Christ, the Lord of Love. In this connection, it might be pointed out that basically, the accessed nations need to grasp the teachings of the Buddha as he enunciated it in the Four Noble Truths. They need to realize that the cause of all sorrow and woe is desire for that which is material. Now you can see in this statement here, if you ask me, how the selfishness of just a handful can really wreak havoc on the world. Now, what if that energy was used in the other direction? Isn't that interesting? B, the United Nations needs to learn to apply the law of love as enunciated in the life of Christ, and to express the truth that no man liveth unto himself, and no nation either, and that the goal of all human effort is loving understanding, prompted by a program of love for the whole. And that loving understanding is certainly the life of the soul, being expressed on earth in each human. If the lives and teachings of these two great avatars can be comprehended and wrought out anew in the lives of men today, in the world of human affairs, in the realm of human thinking, and in the arena of daily living, a present world order, which is today largely disorder, can be so modified and changed that a new world and a new race of men can gradually come into being. Renunciation and the use of the sacrificial will should be the keynote for the interim period after the war, prior to the inauguration of the new age. Students need to remember that all manifestations and every point of crisis are symbolized by the ancient symbol of a point within the circle, the focus of power within a sphere of influence or aura. So it is today with the entire problem of ending the world glamour and delusion which fundamentally lie behind the present acute situation and world catastrophe. The possibility of such a dispelling and dissipation is definitely centered in the two avatars, the Buddha and the Christ. Or if you didn't know, it's interesting because my head is in the middle. I have Christ meditating over here and Buddha meditating over here, which is, I know everybody can see the Buddha back there, but it's hard to see Christ. Not that that matters for anything. I'm just pointing it out. This is interesting stuff, man. As we look at this, it's, you think about the who's running the world today and how it's being run, and how much more this glamour has taken root because of the way that it's being run, and how the collective has picked up on this and made it their own. It is a strange time. The masses are, energetically led by ignorant thoughts, pushed, presented, propagandized, commercialized, just ignorant of what is, just wrapped up in all of this vortex of forces. Within the world of glamour, the world of the astral plane and of the emotions, appeared a point of light. The Lord of Light, the Buddha undertook to focus in himself the illumination, which would eventually make possible the dissipation of glamour. So within the world of glamour, the world of the astral plane and of the emotions, appeared a point of light. The Lord of Light, the Buddha, undertook to focus in himself the illumination, which would eventually make possible the dissipation of glamour. Within the world of illusion, the world of the mental plane, appeared the Christ, the Lord of Love himself, who embodied in himself the power of the attractive will of God. He undertook to dispel illusion by drawing to himself, by the potency of love, by drawing to himself the hearts of all men, and stated this determination in the words, I, if I be lifted up, will draw all men unto me. From the point they then will have reached, the world of spiritual perception, of truth, and of divine ideas will stand revealed. The result will be the disappearing of illusion. The combined work of these two great sons of God, concentrated through the world disciples and through their initiates, must and will inevitably shatter illusion and dispel glamour. So they pave, the way has been paved. The one by the intuitive recognition of reality by minds attuned to it, and the other by the pouring in of light of reason. The Buddha made the first planetary effort to dissipate world glamour. The Christ made the first planetary effort towards the dispelling of illusion. Their work must now be intelligently carried forward by a humanity wise enough to recognize its dharma. This is what we're doing. This is the process here of this is what's happening. This is what we need to do. Men are being rapidly disillusioned and will consequently see more clearly. The world of glamour is being steadily removed from the ways of men. These two developments have been brought about by the incoming new ideas focused through the world intuitives and released to the general public by the world thinkers. Now, I want to say that it's been very hard for people to see through. It took many years. It took many years to see and to be able to look at saying something's wrong here. There were many years of saying something's wrong here. This isn't right. We're missing something. And why? And then people saying, "Well, you can't know it. You can't know how. How are you gonna figure that? How are you gonna know? Nobody knows." And then going from knowing something is wrong to maybe you don't actually know something, but there's an expansion of consciousness that allows you to know in a very different way than what you thought, because it always comes in a different way than you think it's going to. Everything comes in a different way than we think or we anticipate. There's no point in anticipating because you don't know. You can't even imagine how things come. That would, projecting that far out, it's ridiculous anyway. But it's interesting because, there's this idea that something is wrong. People see that the government is corrupt. People see that aspects of what they're involved in or what they pay attention to are corrupt, but yet they don't know how it's corrupt. And then the other problem with that is they're saying it, but they're not grasping the full, because they're still wrapped in Maya, and that vortex comes back around again, in a sense, right? You're wrapped in it. You may get a glimpse out and say, yeah, well, we all know that that's BS. And then there you go, right back into not knowing why it's BS or how it's BS, or putting the rest of the puzzle pieces together to find out what's actually going on. All you can do is say, oh yeah, well, we know that that's BS. But I agree with you that this part is BS over here, but this part over here is not BS, okay? So then we'll have our friends will say, well, this is so corrupt. These people are so corrupt over here, but they'll leave it that these people over here are not corrupt somehow. Or this aspect of the economy is good, but this, these people over here are running it wrong. Well, what are you talking about? That's where you got to bow out, and you got to just, you got to recognize that this is glamour and illusion in process. That's happening in front of your face. And then what are you going to do about it? You are not going to change that. So what's the point there? That takes a little bit of time to learn all these things, is what I'm getting at. Because that vortex of force that Maya is wrapping them, they may see it for a second, but to see it on a full-time basis, that's a huge leap. To admit that we know nothing as we should is a huge leap. But let's keep going here. It has been also largely aided by the well-near or well-nigh unconscious, but nonetheless real recognition of the true meaning of these Four Noble Truths by the masses. Disillusioned and deglamored, if I may use such a term, humanity awaits the coming revelation. This revelation will be brought about by the combined efforts of the Buddha and the Christ. All that we can foresee or foretell in that revelation is that some potent and far-reaching results will be achieved by the merging of light and love, and by the reaction of lighted substance to the attractive power of love. In this sentence, I have given those who can understand a profound and useful hint as to the method and purpose of the undertaking, which was staged for the full moon, June full moon, 1942. I have also given a clue to the true understanding of the work of these avatars, a thing hitherto quite unrealized. It might be added that when an appreciation of the meaning of the words transfiguration of a human being is gained, the realization will come that when the body is full of light, then in that light shall we see light. This means that when the personality has reached a point of purification, of dedication, and of illumination, then the attractive power of the soul, whose nature is love and understanding, can function, and fusion of these two will take place. This is what the Christ proved and demonstrated. And this is what we work towards, right? So we're all working towards. When the work of the Buddha, or the embodied Buddhic principle, is consummated in the aspiring disciple and in his integrated personality, then the full expression of the work of the Christ, the embodied principle of love, can also be consummated, and both these potencies, light and love, will find radiant expression in the transfigured disciple. What is true, therefore, of the individual is also true of humanity as a whole. And today, humanity, having reached maturity, can enter into realization and consciously take part in the work of enlightenment and of spiritual loving activity. The practical effects of this process will be the dissipation of glamour and the release of the human spirit from the thraldom of matter. It will produce also the dispelling of illusion and the recognition of truth as it exists in the consciousness of those who are polarized in the awareness of the Christ. This is necessarily no rapid process, but is an ordered and regulated procedure, sure in its eventual success, but relatively slow in its establishment and sequential process. This process was initiated upon the astral plane by the Buddha and on the mental plane when Christ manifested on earth. It indicated the approaching maturity of humanity. The process has been slowly gathering momentum as these two great beings have gathered around them, their disciples and initiates, during the past 2,000 years. It has reached a point of intensive usefulness as the channel of communication between Shambhala and the hierarchy, has been opened and enlarged, and as the contact between these two great centers and humanity has been more firmly established. At the June full moon, 1942, the first test as to the directness of the communication between the center where the will of God holds sway, the center where the love of God rules, and the center where there is intelligent expectancy was made. That's the triplicity at the top of the chart, right? The medium of the test was the united effort of the Christ, the Buddha, and of those who responded to their blended influence. This test had to be carried out in the midst of the terrific onslaught of the powers of evil, and was extended over the 2 weeks beginning on the day of the full moon, May 30th, 1942, and ended on June 15th, 1942. This is very specific. There was a great concentration of the spiritual forces at that time, and the use of a special invocation, one of which humanity itself may not use, but the success or failure of the test was, in the last analysis, determined by mankind itself. You may feel, though wrongly, that not enough people know about or understand the nature of the opportunity of what is transpiring. You may feel, though wrongly, so judgment we can leave, we can withhold, but the success of such a test is not dependent upon the esoteric knowledge of the few, the relatively few whom the facts and the information have been partially imparted. It is dependent also upon the tendency of the many who unconsciously aspire towards the spiritual realities, who seek for a new and better way of life for all, who desire the good of the whole, and whose longing and desire is for a true experience of goodness, of right human relations, and of spiritual enterprise among men. Their name is Legion, and they are to be found in every nation. When the will of God, expressed in Shambhala and focused in the Buddha, the love of God, expressed in the hierarchy and focused through Christ, and the intelligent desire of humanity, focused through the world disciples, the world aspirants, and the men of goodwill, are all brought into line, either consciously or unconsciously, then a great reorientation can and will take place. This event is something that can happen. The first result will be the illumination of the astral plane and the beginning of the process, which will dissipate glamour. The second result will be the radiation of the mental plane and the dispelling of all past illusions and the gradual revelation of the new truths, which will all past, the new truths of which all past ideals and so-called formulations of truth have only been the signposts. Ponder on that statement. Yeah, I would say. So this is the process that takes place in the human as well as in humanity. So the first result will be the illumination of the astral plane in the beginning of the process, which will dissipate glamour. The second result will be the irradiation of the mental plane and the dispelling of all past illusions and the gradual revelation of the new truths of which all past ideals and so-called formulations of truth have only been the signposts. The signpost indicates the way to go. It does not reveal the goal. It is indicative, but not conclusive. So with all truth up to the present time. And that's the danger of allowing ideals to become idols. The demand is therefore for knowers and for those whose minds and hearts are open, who are free from preconceived ideas fanatically held and from ancient idealisms, which must be recognized as only partial indications of great unrealized truths, truths which can be realized in great measure and for the first time if the lessons of the present world situation and the catastrophe of the war are duly learned and the sacrificial will is called into play. I have made this practical application and the immediate illustration of the teaching anent glamour, illusion, and Maya because the whole world problem has reached a crisis today, and because its clarification will be the outstanding theme of all progress, educational, religious, and economic until 2025. Now, we're sitting right here, right now at the preface of this 2025 coming. And how great is that? So we have to figure that we need to stay focused, seriously focused, and up the ante. We need to get more inclusive, more involved in this. We have to allow, the purification and the integration, and recognize that this is our dharma, as DK has said, right, to do this work. And I'm not talking specifically about this book Glamour work. I'm talking about, what you're doing in your life on the spiritual journey. But in this section with which we are now concerned, we shall consider the practical ways in which illusion, glamour, and the power of Maya can be brought to an end in the life of the individual and eventually in the life of nations and finally in the world. Always we must begin with the unity of life, the microcosm. Then, having grasped process and progress in connection with the individual, the idea can then be extended to the group, the organization, the nation, and to humanity as a whole. Thus, gradually, we shall approach the great idea to which we give the name of God, the macrocosm. Now, this is something that is not easy to explain when, you've got all these people around you saying, we have to stand up for ourselves. Each individual has to do something. Right? And then you say, you can say, that this energetic work is the work that needs to be done. Right? You got to free yourself from glamour and illusion. That's the work, right? So talking about truths, and these things is helping to dissipate this glamour. That's what a lot of these truthers right now are doing, whether they know it or they don't know it, whether it's being done consciously or unconsciously. They are revealing the truth, but what they're doing is actually dissipating some glamour and illusion, or more so, how would you categorize that? It would be both, right? Maybe illusion, but the fourfold noble truths should be recognized and discussed quite regularly as well to dissipate glamour. So the truthers are working towards this, and this is good. The conditions, the astrological conditions for it to happen have certainly come and gone, and we're now able to get these things, to see these things. This is really good news. So the story, the pieces of the puzzle, the puzzle's filled in and the story continues. So very good. All right, well, that's the intro. And then we get more into the instruction as this goes on. So, oh, no, let's continue. Sorry about that. I want to get to the technique here. But we shall in this section deal with techniques, and these might be summarized as follows. The technique of the presence. This is what we're going to start talking about for the rest of this week and for the next, until the book is done, actually, for the next 50 pages or whatever it is. And it'll be much more instructional. I don't know that there's a lot less commentary, I would assume, because it's going to be much more instructional, but we'll see. The technique of the presence. By means of this technique, the soul assumes control of the integrated personality and of its relations, horizontal and vertical. This technique involves the unfolding of the flower of the intuition, dispelling illusion, revealing the angel, indicating the presence, and opening up to the disciple the world of ideas and the door of the higher initiations. Through the disciple's grasp and application of these divine ideas or seed thoughts, he becomes initiate, and the third initiation becomes possible as an immediate goal. The intuition is the applied power of transfiguration. This technique is related to the little-known yoga called Agni Yoga, or the yoga of fire. The technique of light. Number 2, by means of this technique, the illumined mind assumes control over the astral or emotional body and dissipates glamour. When light pours in, glamour fades out, illumination dominates, and the vision of reality can be seen. This technique is related to Raja Yoga, and its goal is the second initiation. It produces the ability to tread the path of discipleship and enables the man to live a life enlightened by divinity. Illumination is the applied power of transformation. Cool. 3 is the technique of indifference. By means of this technique, Maya is ended. For the control of the purified astral vehicle is consciously and technically brought into activity, producing the freeing of the energies of the etheric body from the control of matter or force substance, and bringing men in large numbers onto the probationary path, where there is divine indifference to the call or pull of matter. Then inspiration becomes possible. This technique is related to karma yoga in its most practical form and the use of matter with complete impersonality. The goal of this technique is the first initiation, which enables man to live a life inspired by God. Inspiration is the applied power of transmission. We've talked lots about the different initiations. It makes, all we have to know is that we're doing the work. You may move along to try to figure where you might be and what you're working towards. And I'm not, that's not to say that that's not good, but we need to let that go in lieu of the work and beingness. And once we get comfortable with the fact that we are on the path of return, well, that's all that matters. I mean, yeah, sure, we want to grow up. We want to grow up. We want to be able to help more and more, and those things will come naturally, as long as we keep focused and we keep, moving along here and following the path that has been laid out by those who walked it before us. So, great stuff, man. Great stuff. So we will get into these techniques this week. For the next few days, for sure. And we'll see, I think this comes pretty close to writing the rest of the book out. And, it looks to be here like there's about 50 more pages. And we'll see what happens. So, good stuff. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day. See you soon.